All right, let's put on our financial detective hats today. We're going to dive into a real company's annual report to solve a puzzle that, honestly, at first glance, makes absolutely no sense at all.
So let's get right into it. The company we're looking at is called Tenneco India, and their latest financial results are, well, they're a bit of a head-scratcher. It's the kind of thing that makes you stop and say, wait, what? And this is the central question, isn't it? It just feels wrong. I mean, we're all taught that more revenue usually means more profit. Sales go up, profits go up. So when sales go down and profits shoot up, you got to wonder what's really going on under the hood.
Okay, just look at these numbers for fiscal year 2025. It's pretty stark. Revenue is down over 10%, but at the same time, their net profit is up by a massive 32.5%. How is that even possible? It seems like a paradox, but inside these numbers is a really fascinating story about how this business actually works.
So, to solve this mystery, we first have to understand the company at the heart of it all. So, let's meet Tenneco India.
Tenneco is a real powerhouse in the auto parts world. They're part of a big American company, and they make critical components. We're talking things like catalytic converters and suspension systems for basically all the big car makers in India. You know, Maruti Suzuki, Tata, Mahindra, they all rely on Tenneco. And they're not just some supplier, they are a market leader. And when they had their IPO back in late 2025, it was a huge deal.
In this chart, wow, this just shows you how dominant they really are. When you look at pollution control systems for big commercial trucks, Tenneco has a whopping 57% of the entire market. That's not just a strong position, that's a commanding one. They are absolutely critical to the auto industry.
All right, so now that we know who they are, let's crack this case. How does this profit paradox actually work? Well, the secret is understanding that not all revenue is the same. The key to this entire puzzle is a concept called pass-through costs. See, a huge chunk of the cost of their products, especially catalytic converters, comes from the precious metals inside, like platinum and rhodium. Tenneco doesn't speculate on these prices. They just buy what they need for an order and pass that exact cost straight on to their customers. And there it is. That's the answer. In fiscal year 2025, the global prices for these metals dropped quite a bit. Because Tenneco just passes that cost along, the price they charge their customers also dropped, and that automatically dragged their total revenue number down. But, and here's the magic, their own costs fell by the exact same amount. So the actual profit they make on their own work, their technology and manufacturing, that part actually improved. The revenue dip was kind of like an accounting illusion.
But here's what's really wild. That whole revenue puzzle, as cool as it is to figure out, isn't even the most impressive thing about this company. Not by a long shot. The real story is something else entirely.
Yeah, once you look past those confusing revenue figures, you find an operational machine that is running with just unbelievable efficiency. And this, right here, is where Tenneco is truly in a league of its own.
Let's start with this number, 57.3%. This is their return on capital employed, or ROCE. Put simply, it's a measure of how good they are at turning $1 into more dollars. And trust me, 57.3% is an absolutely phenomenal number.
And then there's this one, 42.6%. That's their return on equity, or ROE. It's all about the profit they generate for their shareholders. Again, an incredibly high number. But these numbers don't mean much without a little context. And this bar chart really puts it all into perspective. Tenneco's ROCE isn't just a little bit better than its competitors. It's more than double the industry average. They aren't just in the same ballpark. They're playing a completely different game.
But if I had to pick one number that just perfectly captures their operational genius, it would be this one, -18 days. This might be the most impressive thing we've seen yet.
So what does that mean? It refers to something called the cash conversion cycle. It's basically the time it takes from when a company spends money on materials to when it gets cash back from a sale. For most companies, especially in manufacturing, this number is positive, maybe 20 or 30 days.
But a negative number? That's the holy grail. It means Tenneco gets the cash from its customers like Mahindra before it even has to pay its own suppliers for the raw materials. Think about that. The business is literally funding itself. This insane efficiency is exactly why those return numbers we just saw are so sky high. It's a ridiculously powerful financial position to be in. So, we've established that we have this incredibly efficient, market-leading company. But, the big question is always, what's next? What does the future look like?
Well, this timeline lays it out pretty clearly. Right now, and in the near term, things look great. New government emission rules are basically creating more demand for their main products, and they're building a new factory to keep up. Even the rise of electric vehicles creates some new opportunities for their suspension business. But that brings us to the elephant in the room, the long-term decline of the internal combustion engine, which is, the core of their business today.
And this tension between the amazing present and the uncertain future creates two very different ways of looking at this company. It's the classic bull versus bear debate. So on one side, you have the bulls, the optimists. They're looking at everything we've talked about, the world-class efficiency, the market dominance, the fact they have almost no debt. But then you have the bears, the pessimists, and they're pointing to that huge long-term threat from EVs. They'll also mention that the company relies heavily on just a few big customers, and that its stock price is already pretty high, leaving not much room for error. And you know what? Both sides have really compelling arguments.
Which brings us to the final million-dollar question. When you put all the pieces together, is Tenneco India a hyper-efficient giant from a fading era, one that's perfectly optimized for a world that's slowly disappearing? Or is it a disciplined, adaptable leader whose operational excellence will allow it to thrive no matter what the future of mobility looks like? That, right there, is the real puzzle left to solve.